Welcome back. It's now time to talk about the impact of fuel subsidy, or not subsidy now, fuel price hike or increase in pump price of petrol on our pockets, on our businesses, on our lives and welfare in general. Nigerians are literally groaning, trying to scrape up survival wherever they can find it. But is there a way out? We need to find out. We ask the people that we understand they are in the know as to what is going on in the country, as well as possible ways on how to manage expectation. We're being joined in the program by an economist and energy expert, Mr. Kelvin Emmanuel from our Abuja studios. And right here in our Lagos studio, we're being joined by Mr. Michael Adele. He's a human capacity development professional and public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the program.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Jeff, thank you so much for having me. Good morning.
All right, Mr. Kelvin, so let's start with you. Right now, Nigerians are looking for as many explainers as possible, because it's like they wake up every day, they're asking themselves a lot of questions. But you're an economist, you understand a bit of how these numbers play out. But for the average Nigerian, life is not fair. Being a Nigerian right now, given the twin policy that some people have saying is draconian, others are saying is necessary for now so that we can have a better life tomorrow. And it's just a potpourri of ideas being pushed on the public. Maybe you help us begin by breaking it down and what we're dealing with at the moment.
Joe, thank you so much. Well, I don't want to go too way back, to talk about the fact that in 2006, Dangote applied for Port Harcourt Refinery. It was won, and that was reversed because share sale agreement documents were not signed by President OBJ, distinguished President OBJ, and then late Musa Yar'Adua came and reversed the sale, and then the dream to build the refinery started. And in the last 18 years since then, NNPCL has spent 12 trillion in turnaround maintenance and doesn't have anything to show for it. And currently, NNPC keeps spending nearly 100 billion naira every year in welfare benefits for staffs of dead refineries that are not working. And you've had a situation where the fact that Nigeria currently imports anywhere around 800,000 metric tons of dirty fuels from Eastern Europe that are blended and cured mostly in Malta, in Central Europe, and brought into Nigeria to an unsuspecting public. And exchange rate has gone from 195 when Jonathan left. We went to 520, came to 365. And between 2019 and 2023, the Central Bank of Nigeria, under the immediate past governor, printed 17.3 trillion naira in ways and means to finance budget deficits and direct intervention programs. And that was not backed by assets or reserves. The naira dropped significantly. And in his attempts to peg the naira, to prevent, a spiral of what you've seen, mostly from exchange rate induced inflation, he went around doing all kinds of FX swap deals with two of the external asset managers of the Central Bank of Nigeria that led to exposures of about $7.5 billion and annual interest payments of anywhere around $800 million. And you had like an impairment on the balance sheet of the central bank, and the net external reserves dropped to negative. The current management of the Central Bank of Nigeria came, and the management has been a little bit better. Most of the FX forwards to banks in Nigeria from clients who requested for FX has been sorted. $2.544 billion is still outstanding. So I'll tell you what, Geoff, there are two major factors that control the price of PMS: crude oil price, exchange rate. Crude oil price hasn't moved significantly. It's still between the range of $78 to $85 per barrel. Exchange rate, however, has moved. And because Nigeria is exposed in terms of importation, what you have is that you've seen the effect of that FX exposure on the price of PMS. Now, the question is, should we do backward integration to ensure that the handling cost for bringing petrol price goes off? Should we pay attention to sections 109 that provides for the option of selling crude oil in Naira. Some people have said, oh, what about the FX loss if Nigeria sells crude oil in Naira? And I say, look, if you sell crude oil in Naira, the FX loss will be compensated from the commercial refiner in Nigeria exporting non-transportation fuels and the excess of what Nigeria consumes out, and bringing back that FX as net export proceeds to the originating banks. It will also be compensated by the fact that currently, in the monthly demand for FX in Nigeria, about 30 to 35% of that demand actually comes from petroleum product imports and crude oil imports. So before Dangote Refinery started this year, Nigeria didn't have to deal with the issue of demand for FX to import crude oil. Because of the failure of NNPC, you know all the modified carrier agreements and crude oil swap arrangement it has to be able to pay IOCs carry oil, to be able to pay international traders who bring in petrol to Nigeria in a value trading mismatch. Okay. The crude oil that should go to commercial refiners is now used for crude oil swaps. So Dangote has been having, since it started, to import the deficits from the US, from South America. And pay attention to the fact that in 2009, the US was one of the highest importers of Nigeria's crude oil. Obama came up with his plan and said that he wants to wean off America from depending, like he said, on volatile regimes who are major crude oil producers. He set his engineers to task. They came up with deep fracking technology, hydraulic fracking, mostly in New Orleans and in Alabama and in Texas, which are the states that produce the most crude oil in America. America went from being a net importer of crude oil, spending about $1 billion a day. Today, America produces 13.3 million barrels of crude oil. And the US has a refining capacity of 6.4 million barrels per day. Okay? So, listen, our problem is the fact that we refuse to learn from history and we keep doing the same thing in the same way and we expect to get a different result. Nigeria now has a commercial refinery that is the 7th largest refinery in the world. That has a Nielsen complexity index of 10.5, which means it can refine any grade of crude oil in the world. Dangote Refinery has started refining PMS. Why are we not off-taking PMS from Dangote Refinery? The scarcity of petrol you see around Nigeria is because NNPC owes traders $6.8 billion US in modified carrier agreements. It doesn't have the crude oil to pay. It doesn't have the cash to pay. The loan it was going to collect through reserve-based lending that Standard Chartered was doing book running for of $2 billion was to borrow new money to refinance old money, to draw down on existing loans, so that the people who bring in PMS into Nigeria won't stop supplying PMS. But the question is, why would you keep importing PMS when there's a refinery in Nigeria producing PMS? That's the question we have to ask the government. That's the question Nigerians need to ask the government.
Indeed, and it seems as if we're in a limbo right now because we're waiting for answers from the government as to the next line of action, particularly after the NNPC disclosed that, look, the other marketers can go ahead and off-take petrol from Dangote. We await answers from the NNPCL Group Managing Director and from the Minister of State for Petroleum. And indeed, from Mr. President, of course, who also directed that meeting brokered by the Vice President and other officials. But let's bring it home now to the impact of all of these uncertainties and indeed the continuing increase in the pump price of petrol on the Nigerian worker. As I bring it home to you now, sir, Mr. Dele, more and more state governors are considering the work from home policy for workers. But what would the impact of that be on efficiency within the civil service? Yes, indeed, it would cushion the impact on the pocket of Nigerian workers. It would reduce the amount spent on transportation. But we're talking about a civil service where they're dealing with sensitive government documents. Sometimes some of those tasks they perform have to be hands-on, and people are waiting for service delivery, on the other side of the divide. What do you envision to be the impact of this increasing resort to work from home policy?
Thank you very much, Bukola, and good morning, Nigerians. I have to take it this way. It's a policy or it's a system which I call robbing Peter to pay Paul. If I'm an employer and I have 10 employees working for me, and I tell them because of the increase in the cost of fuel, which is going to have impact on transportation and some other social economic amenities around the country, work from home. That tells me that I'm trying to shed off my own cost as a businessman and put that cost on the head of my employees. Because if you're going to be working from home, you're going to have to put on your laptops. You're going to have to put on the lighting in your home. You have to put on a lot of the electrical appliances in your home to be able to work, your fans and everything. What that tells me is my costs, the cost of the employees is going to go up. Because I'm going to have to pay more for lighting. I'm going to have to pay, I'm going to have to eat more, eat quite a lot of things. So at the end of the day, I'm shortchanging the social life of my employees because they're going to have to pay more. So it's not a good policy at all. The government has put the burden on every Nigerian, and they have to go back into the box. Now, look into the box again and say, right, the policy we put out into the public is not working because the economy is going to be weakened. We're going to be having not even inflation, hyperinflation, actually, because the cost of goods and services is going to go up because the two major things that drive this economy is power, oil and gas. Okay. Now, if the price of power just went up about a few months ago, the GENCO, the DISCO are forcing every estate, every community to go on ban A. So the prices are shoot up. Now, just a few days ago, or last week, the price of PMS has just gone up again. Now, a lot of companies are going to be shutting down. The base and the economic stability of every economy are the micro businesses in the economy. If you're looking at the big ones, like the multinationals, how many of them do we have in the country? When all the micro businesses are shutting down now, there's going to be increase. Already we have huge percentage of unemployment in the country. We're going to have more. That is the scary part of it. So we're actually sitting on a time bomb, on a powder to be explode. And when they explode, we won't be able to handle it. Unemployment is going to go up drastically, pathetically. A lot of business is going to be shutting down. Okay? Now, the ordinary people that actually sell the foods on the street won't be able to sell this because the amount of money they're going to be spending on transportation to get their food from point A to point B is going to go up. So now they're going to have to add those costs on top of on their goods. And who's going to buy them? So we're actually in a very situation that if we don't address the situation now, then we're going to be in limbo. Remember the last time I came in here, I did an analysis when we were talking about the minimum wage. And I told the government, I said, look, for a household, a wife and a husband and 3 children to survive in this economy, they're going to have to be on 180,000. And I broke down the analysis, the cost of food, transportation, housing, electricity, and all that, public school for their kids. But where do we find ourselves today? 70,000. Now, we're still trying to look into how can we manage that. A lot of the states, subnationals, are still saying they can't afford to pay the 70,000 minimum wage. Now, here we go again. The price of PMS has gone up. Where are we going to find ourselves? It's an alarming rate.
I want us to try to put in context what the president has said about this recent price hike, saying that is a hard decision for development, amongst other decisions that his government has had to make. So we're trying to balance the thinking of government with the reality of this, because we just like to imagine that government is rational, right? Government is thinking right. Government has the best interest of people at heart. That is what we like to assume, right? So we give government a benefit of the doubt. And I'd like to bounce this, both of you, Mr. Kevin Emmanuel. Let me see. You can comment on this first. So when the government, the president says that, these are hard decisions for development. I don't know if you caught that, but that was what was said. about this recent hike. Let's just think like government here. Pardon me, do you think that this government has the best interest of Nigerians at heart? Because if it's saying development, then development should be for the people. But from these decisions, does this look like a government that has the best interest of the people at heart? Is there any way you can look at it that you come to that conclusion?
Kayode, I like data because data tells you a story, okay? Nigeria spends about $28 billion every year on its energy basket. About PMS diesel takes anywhere around 18 of that $28 billion. Total imports for Nigeria every year is about $72 billion. So you know that 30 or 35% already of your import basket goes to energy, okay? Now, if you spend around 7 to 8 trillion naira every year in your budget, paying subsidy on 70 million liters of PMS, which I've repeatedly told the government is a lie, because the government has not provided empirical evidence to show Nigerians. And this is the reason why Dangote has said, look, there's a tracking system he has designed to track every single product that leaves the refinery to show that what the government is quoting might not be the exact picture of the reality, because the very foundation of under-recovery on PMS goes to the daily consumption that is declared by the government that is consumed, okay? Now, if you spend money that is supposed to go to education, security, healthcare, to pay PMS subsidy, to borrow money, get interest, refinance your debt, so you look at the budget and you see that 65 to 70% of the entire budget already goes only to 2 line items: subsidizing PMS and paying interest on debts that is owed, over 100 trillion naira of domestic and external debt that is owed, right? And then you have a brand new refinery in Nigeria that is supposed to take that pressure for demand for FX, for importation of petroleum products into Nigeria, away from the FX market, which is key, because the FX market is a key determinant of the inflation rate you have today, which slowed down for the first time after 22 months consecutively, and then also determines the MPR rate, right? Why are you hesitating to take it? So if you look at these realities, the question you should ask is, if the government is not following logic and reason and evidence-based economics, is it really working for the best interest of Nigerians, or is it working to serve the interest of a few?
So is that a yes or no for you, looking at the data? Do you think this government is working in the best interest of Nigerians?
Looking at how NNPC has mismanaged the oil and gas sector, and looking at the fact that the president has refused to sack NNPC MD, and all the other heads of the regulatory agencies in the oil and gas sector, who are clearly not working in the interest of Nigerians, I don't think the president it shows that the president is working towards alleviating the suffering of Nigerians. I don't think so.
Mr. Adeleye, do you agree?
The evidence and the reality doesn't show.
Do you agree with him? Because I mean, you can speak for the workers and the human capital bit of it.
Absolutely, I do totally agree with him, and I'll give some instances here. The president made an announcement a few months ago about the palliatives. We had 500 billion that went into the social economic area of the economy, structural program. We had another $500 million went into education and health, so they say, and we have some going into food to be supplied, we're giving to all the subnationals. Now, my question is this: if you have the interests of the country, and I put the blames on all the apparatus working around the president, because obviously you do appoint all your essays, your SSAs and all that to go out, agencies and all that. They're not giving or feeding the president in the right direction. Because for me, a simple analysis is, you want to increase the price of PMS, you need to increase the price of power, electricity. Now, what can you do with those palliatives? Because we know from day one, every time the government said they want to give up palliatives, it doesn't get to the people. It doesn't get to the people. So all this money, the food supplies and everything, goes and stops at the box of every government officials. It doesn't get to the people. I live in this community, and I haven't seen a single grain of rice coming to market, not to talk of the money and everything. Now, why don't you do a simple policy and say, okay, Mr. Kyari, you are having difficulty or you want to increase your prices of the PMS. How much is the difference between the price you're selling it now, for example, if it's sold at, say, 587 or 568 per liter, you need to tune it up to what it is now, which is about 53%. Okay? Now, what is the differential in the cost to get it from where it is now to the next one? Okay, do not increase that price for the next 6 months. I'm going to give you this amount of money to substitute that price instead of giving that as palliatives. Go to the power supply company and say, right, do not increase your price. If we need to increase your price, what is the differential? I'll give you extra of money to actually cushion that area. Do not give, so those palliative will go across all nooks and corners of the country, because what drives this economy and every single individual in this country is power, oil and gas, because we use gas for to do our cookings, industrial gas for manufacturing, the petrol for our generators, for micro businesses, for our cars and all that. So if you can put those palliative into those sectors, instead of saying I'm giving it out, because it doesn't get to the people, it will cushion the effect of this hardship that we're having now. So I don't think they're actually working in the interest of the people.
All right, Mr. Emmanuel, let's bring it back to you. And I would like you to speak to how businesses can literally manage in this situation. It's a very dire situation because we've seen businesses shut down, close down. Some may never open again. Some may be lucky to come back upstream. And for every business that closed down, at least one person has lost a job. We can now look at how many persons that individual or that company employs. Everybody's trying to look for one creative way or the other to survive within the economy. And the government keeps promising. Well, I'm going to ask you questions on that maybe later, but let's speak from an economist point of view. What businesses can do right now to survive? Because part of why we're having this conversation is that this is our reality. Whether the government is irresponsible or responsible, or the NNPC is irresponsible or responsible, this is our reality, and we need to get moving and know what to do right now, pending where we know exactly how to fix this problem.
Geoff, what you're going to see basically is that a lot of companies are not going to commission new capital projects. People are going to stay on the sidelines and wait. It's not an easy environment to even advise businesses to go for external loans because of how unstable. There's no forward guidance from the Central Bank of Nigeria on the exchange rate. You can see that the Naira continues to drop. I think it's trading at between 1,630 and 1,645 because there's pressure on the FX market from mostly petroleum importers and also now a commercial refinery. Okay. On the side of staff welfare, it's also difficult to ask employers to increase salaries of their staffs because of how much headwind you have on the economy currently. Businesses are having to deal with higher net interest expense on loans and facilities they have. There's higher costs, so it's not an easy situation at all. So basically, you're going to have a situation where companies are just going to stay on the sidelines and wait and see how this plays out with the FX market, with the energy markets, to know where to put their capital or know whether to close down. Quite a number of businesses are going to close down, like Mr. Mike in the studio in Lagos has said. There are no easy choices. It's difficult to say because I think the rationale behind the NNPC raising the pump price to 897 in Abuja and 855 in Lagos is the fact that it's owing money. It's owing $6.8 billion. And the loan it wants to borrow of $2 billion and tie to 30,000 barrels per day, it's not panning out. Okay? So it's trying to mark up to pay its creditors. So the question you ask me is a blanket general question. It's not a specific question. But all in all, it's going to be difficult for companies to invest in new capital projects in these markets as it is right now.
And we could ask a lot of questions in that space as well. For instance, if it's owing that much, why in the last couple of years have most of NNPC stations been moribund? Those who have been supplying in that space, the petroleum space, are other retailers. But that's another matter for another time. I'd like to ask, in follow-up to Jeffrey's question, the seeming contradiction between what the administration is doing, to shore up investment back home and what is happening at home. For instance, at the just concluded China-Africa summit, we heard the president say that you may have been hearing about, the increase in the pump price of petrol back home. These are difficult decisions that the administration must take in order to, recoup the gains later on. And the president is speaking to potential investors, but back home, the atmosphere is becoming increasingly difficult for businesses to thrive. And we've seen a number of divestments. Are you concerned about that contradiction, Mr. Emmanuel? Just in a few words so that Mr. Adeleye can also speak to it.
Well, businesses, especially if I'm going to speak for the oil and gas sector, for example, the issues around divestment is not because of what we think it is. The issues around divestment has to do with the fact that a lot of the IOCs selling off their assets, have legal liabilities, decommissioning and abandonment costs. There are issues with insecurity of pipes in Nigeria. There are issues around, lack of metering between flow station and terminal. The fact that for a lot of brownfields and greenfields, NNPC does not have the capital to put up their own share of FID, and they have to rely on what they call carried cost in oil and gas and pay back carry oil without any interest for carry tax relief that they give the IOCs for those investments. The IOCs feel it's safer to operate deep offshore because it doesn't present them with the liabilities and environmental issues and community issues that comes with dealing onshore. So if a Total or a Shell or a Mobil, for example, is going deep offshore, it doesn't have much to do with the realities that we think it is, that the Nigerian economy is. The issue here is to get crude oil production up. And for you to get crude oil production up, I've always advocated for the fact that Section 65 of the PIA says that Nigeria may move, NNPC may move from unregistered joint ventures and production sharing contracts to incorporated joint ventures, where you incorporate as legal entity every joint venture you sign with an operator upstream. That way you can raise FID that is shared. And that way you can move from the model where NNPC always have to rely on the operator to put up the capital. That presents governance and transparency, and it will increase oil output. And what happens when you increase oil output is you have enough FX for the central bank to increase and meet up with its balance of payment obligations. When you stabilize the FX market, you stabilize inflation, and the MPR will begin to come down, which will present like a good situation for businesses to be able to invest in the Nigerian economy. It's a vicious cycle. Like Mr. Mike said, the bread and butter of the Nigerian economy is oil and gas. Let nobody tell us otherwise. The bread and butter is oil and gas. If the oil and gas sector does not work, the economy will not work. This is the reality we have today.
Right.
Mr. Adeleye, in a few words, the same question.
Let me speak from the perspective of a human capital development. Government policies drive the economy. Okay, now for any business to survive in this country, the government needs to have a policy that actually aid the businesses. Now, if you look at the whole thing that happens now, 70,000 minimum wage has just been put on the table. A lot of private businesses are struggling to pay that amount of money. Now, what the government can do for businesses to survive now is to look into how they touch the corporation taxes that businesses pay to them. Because if you don't do so, Mr. Bill Gates came into the country a few days ago and said we're paying too little taxes. Now, who pays the taxes? The stronghold of any economy is the human capital strength. Now, if this prices goes up the way it's going up now, you're going to have a lot of businesses shutting down. A lot of workers going to have to sit back home so they don't pay taxes. A lot of businesses that are meant to be paying taxes wouldn't be able to pay the taxes because they are shutting down. Okay? Now, for us to be able to survive in this economy, the government has to bring out the policy whereby they're going to say, okay, we need to help all businesses for them to survive. The corporation taxes that you pay to us have perhaps give some businesses tax holidays, reduce corporation taxes for them to survive. If you don't do that, we're going to have multiple businesses shutting down. Now, a lot of people are going to go out of work. Tax is going to be depleted. You're going to have massive unemployment rate, and the economy is going to be in shambles. So for us to survive now, it's the government policy that drive the economy that we need to look into, and the government has to think about what policies they have to put on the table to make business to survive.
Well, I would have taken it from there to talk about the issue of rethinking our policies here, but the time, we're totally out of time. Must thank you both, gentlemen. Kelvin Emmanuel, economist and energy expert, as well as Mr. Michael Adele, human capacity development professional and public affairs analyst. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your insight and for bringing perspective. We hope that the government will think through and do better. Thank you.
Thank you very much.